We're at day 33 of the shutdown, and every day it seems like the damage continues to accrue across the government, in many cases in areas that I would not have predicted would be so negatively affected by the shutdown. And that spans a lot of different areas. I want to touch on many. The first, though, is the criminal justice system, the FBI, the courts. Their ability to do their jobs is apparently being constrained in a lot of different ways. So FBI agents were interviewed by Natasha Bertrand of The Atlantic, and she says one agent, speaking anonymously, said his unit had lost several sources who have worked for months and years to penetrate groups and target subjects due to the inability to pay confidential sources. Quote, "These assets cannot be replaced," the agent said. Quote, "Serving my country has always been a privilege, but it has never been so hard or thankless." Another agent reported not being able to pay confidential human sources risks losing them and the information they provide forever. It is not a switch that we can turn on and off. Others complained that their investigations were being slow-rolled, with dozens of grand jury subpoenas going undelivered. Quote, "The operational impacts of the shutdown are immeasurable," said one agent in the Northeast region. Quote, "We have postponed the indictment of subjects due to the shutdown." And when Donald Trump finds out that indictments are not going out, he is not going to allow the shutdown to continue. We need to have smooth running federal investigations.
He's like, wait, the FBI can't invest crooks anymore? Great, the shutdown continues. So he has literally had dozens of texts attacking his own FBI because they're investigating criminals like himself. So I don't think he's gonna shed a tear over this, but for the rest of us, if you actually cared about his stated reason of shutting the government down, which was it's a national security problem, well, then this is incredibly counterproductive because this is an actual national security problem. So the border has been the same way for decade after decade, and you could say too many people have crossed over without documents, but in those folks on average commit a lot less crime than the average American does, and that's a fact. So there was no new emergency. That's also a fact. In fact, the number of people crossing the border is lower now than it was earlier. So there's nothing new that creates any kind of national security threat. In this case, this is new, and it is a national security threat because the FBI can no longer pursue criminals. They've got issues on multiple fronts. So their informants are not getting paid, so they're leaving in forever, so as John just pointed out to you. But they are also having trouble getting subpoenas because legal assistants aren't being paid. So they can't subpoena people. They're having trouble getting warrants. The judiciary is now backed up and is no longer taking less urgent cases. And the reasons pile on top of one another. And so now criminals are literally getting away with their different crimes because the FBI is not equipped to be able to handle these investigations without any money, which makes sense, right? And so it's not just whether that FBI agent's getting paid or not, it's all the support staff and everything surrounding it. And there's a couple of other national security issues, including TSA agents not showing up to work. But this is now a real legitimate threat to our security.
Yeah, and one of the things that in all of our coverage going back weeks now on this that I've tried to stress is that the right wing wants you to believe that, sure, the shutdown's rough and man, people aren't gonna get paid, but someday the shutdown will end, they'll get their pay, and everything's back to the way it was. But that's not true. There are a lot of things that you can't take back. People who go into debt and have their credit ruined during this because they're not being paid, their credit doesn't just magically improve once they get their paycheck. I spoke with a union vice president for air traffic controllers this morning, and he said that people have left, they're not working there anymore. Their careers have been derailed, and even if the shutdown ends, maybe some of them can get jobs in the field again, but many are now done. That is a permanent change to their life. These sources that are being burned, that is a permanent change. Now, you brought up the courts. So additional reporting, the Administrative Office of the US Courts said in a statement on Tuesday that the federal courts can sustain funded operations through January 31st, which is like a week away or a little bit more, through an extension made possible by moving funds around. Courts will continue to conduct criminal trials, but some federal courts have had to issue orders suspending or postponing civil cases in which the government is a party. Again, an area where hypothetically Donald Trump might benefit since he is potentially the target of some of those lawsuits. Similar things like not only you mentioned TSA, but the IRS announced today that earlier it had been said that refunds would still go out on time, but they can no longer promise that.
So now more security matters. U.S. attorneys' offices are dealing with their own employees not being paid and other budget constraints. So there goes the prosecutors. Trump government was going to participate, as every U.S. government does every year, in a border security conference. In this case, it was going to be in Scotland. 85 different countries get together and share their notes on how to prevent people crossing borders illegally, and all the way up to smuggling in nukes, etc. And now that is being postponed because we don't have any money to go to that conference. So now, think about it, guys. And I almost hesitate in saying this, but the terrorists are, they can figure it out on their own, right? Now, if you were a terrorist, when would you strike? When there's less TSA agents to monitor people at airports? Remember, almost no terrorist comes through the border. They come through planes more than anything else, right? And then they use planes as weapons. Now the TSA agents can't check you as well. The FBI is hurt, prosecutors are hurt, and there's very little cooperation between government agencies, and things are falling apart. So it's not a joke, and it's not an exaggeration. If anybody was gonna strike, unfortunately, this would be a good time to do it, which again, that's why I hesitate in saying it. I don't think people are watching and be like, yeah, right, like, oh, okay, yeah, I hadn't thought of that, right? But we gotta go. We gotta open up the government, okay? We gotta have the FBI on the job. We gotta have the TSA guys checking there at airports, etc. Because tick, 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 tick. I mean, in this case, unfortunately, almost literally, like, if we don't get this thing straightened out, now we have a real danger on our hands.
Yeah, and everything that you said is true, but even implicit in all that we're saying is a bit of normalization of insanity, where you're saying if it continues, but we are already historically far into a shutdown by a good, like 50% higher than the next longest shutdown in history. But this is the effect of Donald Trump. Everything that you thought you knew about the government and the way things could or should ever function gets thrown out the window.
There's only one silver lining here, which is that in most government shutdowns, they're short. They only affect 25% of the government. The military, the cops, etc., keep working. So then people oftentimes are like, oh, the parks are shut down. I guess that's the only thing government does. Now this has lasted so long and it's affected so many different areas. The Coast Guard came out yesterday and was like, what are we doing here? None of our guys are getting paid. We can't work. Yeah. So now they're starting to take other jobs, right? So now people are going, oh yeah, I guess the Coast Guard and the FBI are the government, aren't they? And so are prosecutors and all these other people that keep us safe and all other vital things that the government does. Because now that we're falling apart at the seams, that's why Trump's numbers are in the tank. They're tanking and they're down to 7% for keeping the government shut down in order to fund the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, 93% of the country's against it. Because part of what's happened here is American people going, oh, it turns out we need the government.
Yeah.
And that's your silver lining.
Yeah, that's true, and that's 7%. I mean, no matter how you look at it, that's awful. But that means he's lost the vast majority of his base, like the core, like teens and MAGA hots are turning against him at this point. Like that's how bad that is. And an AP poll has him dropping from 42% approval last month to 34% now. That is a big chunk. And you look across all of these different polls, he is down. In most of these, he is down to the previous lowest number he'd ever been at was in the wake of the attempt to repeal the ACA and when we were talking about the tax bill initially. That was his previous low in like December of 2017. And he has reached that again.
Yeah, 34%. That is a miserable approval rating. That is terrible. So, and by the way, I mean, this is classic Trump. So, I didn't get what I want, so I'm gonna shut the government down. Okay, I'm gonna take my ball, go home. I mean, that's what kids do, right? And we told you all along he was a spoiled child. He's been a spoiled child his whole life. Never understood the consequences of his actions. Never read past a page. So this is what happens when you don't understand the consequences of your actions. All of a sudden, people go, "Oh, it turns out the president is a spoiled child."
Yeah.
And the brat is now affecting our lives.
Yeah.
And we can't stand it. Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.